Imagine this, you're 7 months pregnant, living the perfect life with your CEO husband until you discover his steamy affair with his assistant. But when you confront the truth, she pushes you off a rooftop, plummeting 3 stories down. Miraculously, you and your baby survive. But that's only the start of a nightmare filled with gaslighting, custody battles, and a web of deadly revenge that spans years. Welcome back to Alex Review Stories, where we dive into the most gripping tales. Today's epic is from CEO's Mistress, pushed pregnant wife off roof. Her survival stunned all. Get ready for twists that will leave you breathless and a mother's unbreakable fight that inspires. Sarah Mitchell smoothed her hands over her 7 month pregnant belly as she settled into the familiar chair at Dr. Peterson's office. The autumn sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow across the room filled with certificates and baby photos from grateful patients. At 34, this was supposed to be the happiest time of her life. Everything looks perfect. Sarah, Dr. Peterson said, reviewing her chart with a smile. Blood pressure is good, baby's heartbeat is strong, and your weight gain is right on track. Sarah beamed, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. David will be so relieved. He's been worried about every little thing lately. Dr. Peterson paused, glancing at her notes. Actually, that reminds me. Your husband called yesterday asking about the impact of stress on pregnancy. Is everything all right at home? The question hit Sarah like a cold wave. David had called her doctor about stress. Her perfect husband, CEO of a thriving tech startup, who brought her flowers every Friday and rubbed her feet every night, was worried about her stress levels enough to call her doctor behind her back. I'm sorry, what exactly did he ask? Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. Oh, just general questions about how emotional stress might affect the baby. Nothing specific. Dr. Peterson's tone was casual, but Sarah noticed the slight furrow in her brow. Are you feeling particularly stressed lately? Sarah forced a smile. No more than any expectant mother, I suppose. But as she drove home to their pristine suburban house in Westchester, David's mysterious call gnawed at her. She'd given up her marketing career at his tech company 2 years ago when they started trying for a baby. The transition from ambitious executive to devoted homemaker had been challenging, but David had been so supportive, so loving. Their house stood like a monument to their success, a colonial with perfectly manicured gardens, a 3-car garage, and a nursery they'd spent months decorating together. Sarah pulled into the driveway, noting David's Tesla wasn't there yet. He'd been working late more often recently, building the company toward its next funding round. Inside, Sarah kicked off her shoes and headed to the kitchen to start dinner. That's when she saw it, David's phone, forgotten on the granite countertop. He never forgot his phone. Never. The screen lit up with a text notification, and Sarah's blood turned to ice. Missing you already. Can't wait for tonight. Hey. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the phone. More messages appeared. David, you were incredible last night. When are you going to tell her? I can't keep pretending to be just your assistant much longer. The phone slipped from Sarah's fingers, clattering to the floor as the reality crashed over her. David was having an affair with his assistant, the young, ambitious woman Sarah had mentored when she first joined the company. The woman who had her old job, her old life, her old dreams. Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank onto the kitchen stool, her pregnant belly pressing against the counter. 7 months pregnant, and her husband was betraying her with another woman. The perfect life she'd built, the sacrifice of her career, the dreams they'd shared. All of it was a lie. The sound of David's key in the front door made her jump. She quickly grabbed his phone, placing it back where she'd found it, and tried to compose herself. But when David walked into the kitchen, his familiar smile and, "How was your appointment, honey?" felt like acid in her ears. Fine, she managed, watching his face carefully. Dr. Peterson said everything looks good. That's wonderful. He kissed her forehead, and Sarah fought the urge to pull away. I'm sorry I'm late. big client meeting ran over. Liar! The words screamed in Sarah's head as she watched her husband of 6 years, the father of her unborn child, lie to her face with such practiced ease. David, she said, her voice barely steady. Dr. Peterson mentioned you called her about stress. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Guilt, fear. But it was gone so quickly, Sarah almost wondered if she'd imagined it. I just worry about you, sweetheart. You've seemed tense lately, and I wanted to make sure it wouldn't affect the baby. Another lie. Sarah nodded, playing the role of the grateful wife. That's thoughtful of you. But as David showered and they sat down to dinner, Sarah's mind raced. How long had this been going on? How many late nights, client meetings, and business trips had been lies? And what did? When are you going to tell her? Tell her what? After dinner, David retreated to his home office for important calls, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and a sink full of dishes. She'd been reduced to this, washing dishes while pregnant, financially dependent, while her husband's mistress lived her old life. The rain started as she finished cleaning, fat drops hitting the kitchen window like tears. Sarah pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the baby kick as if sensing her distress. I'm sorry, little one, she whispered. Mommy's world is falling apart. That night, as David slept peacefully beside her, Sarah stared at the ceiling, her mind churning with questions and possibilities. She thought about the woman who had sent those messages. Alexis Blackwood, 28 years old, ambitious, brilliant, and everything Sarah used to be before she'd given it all up for love. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Sarah made a decision. She couldn't confront David yet, not without more information, but she couldn't pretend everything was normal either. She needed to know the truth, all of it. As thunder rumbled overhead and lightning illuminated their bedroom, Sarah quietly slipped out of bed and padded to the nursery, the room they'd painted together, where they'd assembled the crib and hung the mobile, where they'd dreamed of their future family. She sat in the rocking chair, surrounded by gifts from her baby shower, and let the tears finally come. Her perfect life, her perfect marriage, her perfect husband, all of it was crumbling around her, and she was 7 months pregnant with nowhere to go. But as she sat there, something else began to grow alongside her despair. A fierce, protective instinct she'd never felt before. This baby was hers, and she would do whatever it took to protect them both. The next morning, Sarah woke to find David already dressed for work, his phone securely in his pocket. I might be late again tonight, he said, not meeting her eyes. Another client dinner. Sarah nodded, playing the part of the understanding wife. Of course. I'll keep dinner warm. He kissed her goodbye, and Sarah watched through the window as he drove away. Then she grabbed her laptop and began to research. Phone records, bank statements, anything that might give her answers. What she found made her stomach turn. Expensive restaurants she'd never been to. Hotel charges for nights when David claimed to be working late. Credit card payments to a jewelry store where she'd never shopped. Her husband wasn't just having an affair. He was living a double life. And Sarah had been too trusting, too naive to see it. The baby kicked, and Sarah placed both hands on her belly. We're going to be okay, she whispered. Mommy's going to figure this out. But even as she said the words, Sarah felt the walls of her perfect life closing in around her. She was financially dependent, emotionally isolated, and 7 months pregnant. David held all the cards, and she was about to discover just how ruthless he could be. That evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Sarah made her decision. She couldn't live this lie anymore. She packed a small bag with essentials, her important documents, and some cash she'd been saving for the baby. When David came home, his hair damp from the rain, Sarah was waiting in the living room with her bag beside her. We need to talk, she said, standing up with some difficulty. Her pregnant belly made everything more challenging, a constant reminder of her vulnerability. David's face went pale. Sarah, what's wrong? I know about Alexis. The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. David's expression shifted from confusion to guilt to something harder, more calculating. Sarah, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you're sleeping with your assistant while I'm carrying your child? Can you explain the hotels, the restaurants, the jewelry? David's jaw tightened. It's not what you think. And what is it, David? Because those text messages seem pretty clear to me. He stepped closer, and Sarah saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Something cold and dangerous. You went through my phone. It was right there, and the messages were right there. And our whole marriage has been right there falling apart while I was too stupid to see it. Sarah, calm down. This isn't good for the baby. Don't you dare use our baby as a weapon against me. Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. I'm leaving. David, I can't do this anymore. She reached for her bag, but David moved faster, blocking her path to the door. You're not going anywhere. Excuse me. You're pregnant with my child. Sarah, you're not thinking clearly. You're not taking my baby anywhere. The way he said, my baby, sent chills down Sarah's spine. Not our baby. Not the baby. My baby. David, move aside. I'm leaving. No, you're not. His voice was quiet but firm. You're upset. You're hormonal. And you're not making rational decisions. You're staying here where I can take care of you. Thunder crashed overhead, and in the lightning flash, Sarah saw her husband clearly for the first time. The charming smile was gone, replaced by something cold and controlling. How had she never seen it before? I'm not your prisoner, David. You're my wife, and that's my baby you're carrying. You're not going anywhere. Sarah backed away, her heart pounding. This wasn't the man she'd married. This wasn't the man she'd fallen in love with. This was a stranger, and she was trapped in a house with him, 7 months pregnant and completely alone. As if reading her thoughts, David's expression softened slightly. Sarah, honey, let's talk about this rationally. You're overreacting. It's just stress from the pregnancy. But Sarah was done listening to his lies. She moved toward the back door, but David was there first, his hand on her arm. I said you're not leaving. Sarah looked into his eyes and saw her future stretching out before her. Trapped, controlled, isolated. Her baby would grow up in this house of lies, and she would be nothing more than a kept woman, dependent on a man who didn't love her. Let go of me, David. I'm trying to protect you, both of you. From what? From making a mistake you'll regret. Sarah wrenched her arm away, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. The only mistake I'm regretting is trusting you. Lightning illuminated the room again, and in that moment, Sarah saw the truth clearly. Her perfect life had been a prison, and she'd been too blind to see the bars. As thunder crashed overhead, Sarah realized her real fight was just beginning. She was 7 months pregnant, financially dependent, and married to a man who would use their child as a weapon against her. But as she looked at David's face, cold and calculating in the stormlight, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. The fierce determination that had made her a successful executive, the strength that had built her career, the fight that she'd buried beneath years of domestic contentment. David thought he held all the cards, but Sarah was about to remind him that he'd married a woman who'd never backed down from a fight. The war for her freedom, her child, and her future was about to begin. Sarah woke the next morning to find David already gone, but not before he'd made his point crystal clear. Their joint bank accounts had been frozen. Her credit cards were declined. Her phone service had been suspended. In one night, her husband had systematically cut off every avenue of independence she might have had. She sat in the pristine nursery, surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of baby furniture and accessories, and realized she couldn't afford to buy herself a cup of coffee. The irony was crushing. Trapped in luxury, prisoner in paradise. The baby kicked, and Sarah winced, placing her hand on her swollen belly. I'm sorry, little one, Mommy got us into quite a mess. The house phone rang, and Sarah hurried to answer it, hoping for any contact with the outside world. Her sister Lisa's voice was like a lifeline. Sarah, I've been trying to reach your cell all morning. Are you okay? Lisa, thank God. I need your help. What's wrong? You sound terrible. Sarah broke down, telling her sister everything. The affair, the confrontation, David's financial manipulation. But Lisa's response wasn't what she expected. Sarah, honey, are you sure you're thinking clearly? I mean, you're 7 months pregnant. Your hormones are all over the place. Maybe David's just trying to protect you from making impulsive decisions. Lisa, he's having an affair. Men go through things too. Sarah, maybe it's a midlife crisis. Maybe he's scared about becoming a father. Have you thought about couples counseling? Sarah felt the first crack in her heart. Even her own sister was taking David's side, suggesting she was too hormonal to think straight. I saw the messages. Lisa, I saw the hotel bills. But Sarah, you have such a good life. David loves you. He's built you this beautiful home. He takes care of you. Maybe this is just a phase. After Lisa hung up, promising to check in soon, Sarah sat in stunned silence. David had been planning this for months. He'd laid the groundwork, the story that she was unstable, hormonal, irrational, and people were believing it. Sarah walked to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Her face was puffy from crying, her hair unwashed, her maternity clothes rumpled. She looked exactly like what David wanted everyone to see, a woman losing her grip on reality. But as she stared at her reflection, Sarah remembered who she used to be. She'd been a marketing executive, a problem solver, a woman who'd built campaigns and strategies and solutions. She'd gotten soft, comfortable, dependent. But underneath the pregnancy glow and suburban complacency, that woman was still there. Sarah showered, did her hair, and put on makeup for the first time in weeks. She dressed in her nicest maternity outfit and drove to her old office building, using the last of the cash from her purse for gas. Walking through the gleaming lobby of Mitchell Tech Solutions, named after David, though she'd helped him build it, Sarah felt a stab of nostalgia. This had been her world once, her domain of conference rooms and strategy meetings and quarterly targets. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like traveling back in time. Sarah had been the vice president of marketing before she'd given it up for love. Now someone else sat in her old office, someone who was sleeping with her husband. Sarah. What a surprise. Sarah turned to see Janet from HR, a woman she'd hired 3 years ago. Janet's smile was warm but surprised. I was just in the neighborhood, Sarah lied smoothly. Thought I'd stop by and see how everyone's doing. You look amazing. When are you due? 2 months. How's the new marketing VP working out? Janet's expression shifted slightly. Oh, Alexis is very dedicated, very ambitious. I'm sure she is. Is she in today? She's in back-to-back meetings with David. They've been practically joined at the hip lately, working on the new campaign launch. Sarah's stomach twisted. Of course they were in meetings together. Of course they were practically joined at the hip. Actually, Sarah, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to ask you something. Janet glanced around nervously. Has David seemed different lately? More controlling? Some of the staff have mentioned he's been very hands-on with everything, almost micromanaging. Sarah's pulse quickened. What kind of things? Well, he's been monitoring everyone's computer usage, checking phone logs, asking about personal relationships. It's created a pretty tense atmosphere. Some people think he's planning layoffs, but others think he's just, I don't know, paranoid about something. Sarah filed this information away. David was tightening control everywhere, not just with her. I should go, Sarah said. But Janet, if you ever need anything, you have my number. Actually, Janet lowered her voice. I've been thinking about updating my resume. The atmosphere here has gotten really toxic. If you know anyone who's hiring, Sarah managed to smile. I'll keep my ears open. As Sarah left the building, She felt the weight of her situation settling over her like a heavy blanket. David wasn't just having an affair. He was systematically controlling every aspect of his world, and she was just another piece on his chessboard. But Sarah had spent years in the business world. She knew how to read people, how to gather information, how to build strategies. David might have cut off her money, but he couldn't cut off her mind. That afternoon, Sarah called her old boss, Robert Chen, who'd started his own marketing firm after leaving Mitchell Tech. "Sarah, how wonderful to hear from you. How's the pregnancy going?" "Actually, Robert, I was calling about work. I'm thinking about getting back into marketing after the baby's born." There was a pause. "Sarah, I'd love to have you on the team, but I have to be honest. I've heard some concerning things." Sarah's heart sank. "What kind of things?" "Well, Alexis Blackwood reached out to me a few weeks ago. She mentioned you'd been having some difficulties, mental health issues. She was very concerned about you, said David was worried about your stability." Sarah closed her eyes. Alexis had been planning this, poisoning her professional reputation before Sarah even knew she needed to protect it. "Robert, I can assure you that I'm perfectly stable. I'm just looking at my options." Of course, of course. But Sarah, maybe you should focus on your health right now. Pregnancy can be so stressful. Maybe wait until after the baby's born and you've had time to recover. After Robert hung up, Sarah sat in her silent house, feeling the walls closing in. David and Alexis had been planning this for months. They'd built a narrative about her instability, her inability to handle stress, her need for protection and control. The baby kicked hard, and Sarah gasped, suddenly feeling sharp pains in her abdomen. She waited, timing the pains, but they seemed to fade. False labor, probably, brought on by stress. She pulled out her old copy of What to Expect When You're Expecting, trying to calm herself, but the words blurred together. She thought about Eat, Pray, Love, sitting on her nightstand, about Elizabeth Gilbert's journey to find herself after her marriage fell apart. Sarah had read it years ago, before she'd gotten married, and thought it was a luxury she'd never need. Now she wished she could just disappear to Italy or India, start over somewhere no one knew her name or her story. The front door opened, and David called out, "Sarah, I'm home." Sarah quickly composed herself, closing the book and smoothing her clothes. David appeared in the doorway, his charming smile in place, carrying a bouquet of roses. "How was your day, honey?" "Fine, quiet." "Good, I brought you these." He handed her the roses, and Sarah caught a whiff of perfume on his shirt. Not her perfume. "Thank you." "Sarah, about last night. I think we should talk to someone, a counselor. Maybe. This kind of stress isn't good for you or the baby." Sarah looked at him carefully. "What kind of counselor?" "Someone who specializes in pregnancy-related anxiety. I've already made some calls. Dr. Martinez has an opening next week." "You made calls without asking me." David's smile tightened slightly. "I'm worried about you. Sarah, you're clearly not yourself lately. The accusations, the paranoia, the attempt to leave, these aren't normal behaviors for you." "Paranoia, David. I saw the messages." "What messages, Sarah? You're not making sense." Sarah stared at him. He was gaslighting her, making her question her own memory, her own sanity. And he was doing it with such practiced ease that she wondered how long he'd been doing it. "The messages from Alexis. On your phone?" "Alexis sends me work messages. Sarah, she's my VP of marketing. Of course we communicate." "These weren't work messages." "David." "Sarah, I think you're confused. Maybe you saw some work messages and misinterpreted them because you're feeling insecure about your changing body, about the baby coming." For a moment, Sarah almost believed him. The messages had been brief, and she'd been emotional, and maybe, no. She knew what she'd seen. She knew what she'd felt. David was lying to her face, and he was doing it so smoothly that she could see how he'd convinced everyone else that she was the problem. I'd like to see Dr. Martinez, she said finally. David's smile became genuine. I'm so glad, honey. I think it will really help you process these feelings. That night, as David slept beside her, Sarah stared at the ceiling and realized the true scope of her prison. It wasn't just financial dependence or physical isolation. David was systematically undermining her reality, making her question her own perceptions, her own sanity. But Sarah had always been a fighter. She'd built her career on reading people, on understanding motivations, on seeing through corporate politics and power plays. David might have the upper hand now, but Sarah was done being a victim. She thought about her old business cards, tucked away in a drawer somewhere. She thought about the woman she used to be, the woman who'd never backed down from a challenge. That woman was still inside her, under the swollen belly and the suburban complacency. The baby kicked, and Sarah placed her hand on her stomach. We're going to be okay, she whispered. Mommy's going to figure this out. But even as she made the promise, Sarah felt the first real contractions of the evening. Sharp, regular pains that made her gasp and sit up in bed. David, she whispered, shaking his shoulder. David, I think something's wrong. He woke instantly, switching into concerned husband mode. What's wrong? Are you in pain? I'm having contractions. They're pretty strong. David was already reaching for his phone, calling Dr. Peterson, his voice full of worry and love. For a moment, Sarah almost forgot about the affair, about the lies, about everything except the fear that she might be losing her baby. As they rushed to the hospital, Sarah gripping David's hand in the back of the taxi, she heard him on the phone with someone else. Don't worry, he said quietly, thinking she couldn't hear over her own pain. After tonight, she won't be a problem anymore. The words hit Sarah like ice water. Even in her pain, even in her fear for her baby, she heard the cold calculation in her husband's voice. Whatever David was planning, whatever he meant by, she won't be a problem anymore. Sarah knew her fight for survival was about to become a fight for her life. The hospital's bright lights felt harsh against Sarah's exhausted eyes as Dr. Peterson finished her examination. The contractions had been false labor, brought on by stress, but Dr. Peterson was taking no chances. I'm putting you on bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy, she announced, her voice firm but kind. No unnecessary stress, no strenuous activity, and I want you to see me twice a week until delivery. Sarah nodded, relief flooding through her that the baby was safe, but she caught the look of satisfaction that flashed across David's face, gone so quickly she almost missed it. Doctor, is there anything I can do to help? David asked, his voice full of concerned husband concern. I want to make sure Sarah and the baby are both safe. Just make sure she stays calm and rested. This kind of stress-induced false labor can be dangerous if it continues. As they left the hospital, David's hand protectively on Sarah's back. She felt the weight of her new prison settling over her. Bed rest meant she couldn't leave the house, couldn't investigate, couldn't even pretend to have independence. I'll work from home for the next few weeks, David said as they got into the car. I want to be there to take care of you. That's not necessary, Sarah protested. I'll be fine. Sarah, you almost went into premature labor. I'm not leaving you alone. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she heard David on the phone in his office down the hall. The words drifted through the walls, fragments of conversation that made her blood run cold. The timing is perfect. She's confined to bed, won't be able to cause any problems. Yes, the doctor said stress could trigger early labor. Sarah's hands instinctively moved to her belly. David was talking about her like she was a problem to be managed, an obstacle to be overcome. 2 weeks passed in a blur of forced rest and careful monitoring. David worked from home, bringing her meals, checking on her regularly, playing the perfect devoted husband. But Sarah noticed how he always seemed to be watching her, how he monitored her phone calls, how he'd subtly steered conversations away from work or their friends. The company's annual gala was scheduled for the following Friday, and Sarah had been looking forward to it for months. It would be her first time out of the house in weeks, her first chance to see other people, to feel normal again. I don't think you should go, David said when she brought it up. Doctor, Peterson said no stress, and you know how these events can be. David, I've been planning this gala for months. I helped to design the whole theme. Alexis took over the planning. She's done a wonderful job. Of course she had. Alexis had taken over everything that had once been Sarah's. Her job, her husband, her life. I need to get out of this house, Sarah said firmly. I need to see people, to feel human again. David studied her face carefully. If you're sure you're up for it? I'm sure. The night of the gala, Sarah took extra care with her appearance. She'd found a beautiful black maternity dress that made her feel elegant despite her swollen belly. She did her hair and makeup carefully, wanting to look like the successful, confident woman she used to be. The venue was spectacular. The rooftop terrace of the Meridian Hotel, with twinkling lights and a view of the city skyline. Sarah had chosen this location herself, back when she'd been involved in planning. As they arrived, Sarah felt a surge of energy she hadn't experienced in weeks. The familiar world of networking and business relationships, the buzz of conversation and laughter, the sense of being part of something bigger than her domestic prison. Sarah, you look absolutely radiant. Sarah turned to see Marcus Webb, one of their biggest clients, approaching with his wife. They chatted for a few minutes, and Sarah felt herself coming alive again, her old confidence returning. Excuse me, David said, touching Sarah's arm. I need to speak with the investors. Will you be okay here? Of course. Sarah watched him walk away, noting how he immediately found Alexis in the crowd. She was stunning in a red dress that hugged her slim figure, her dark hair swept up elegantly. Everything Sarah used to be, everything she'd given up. Sarah. She turned to find Janet from HR, looking concerned. I'm so glad you're here, Janet said quietly. I wanted to talk to you about something. What's wrong? It's about the restructuring. David announced it today. He's eliminating several positions, including mine. Sarah felt her stomach drop. What restructuring? You don't know he's been planning it for months? Cost-cutting measures, he says. But Sarah, some of the people being let go are the ones who were most loyal to you, who might have questioned what's been happening. Before Sarah could respond, she felt a hand on her arm. Alexis had appeared beside her, her smile bright and predatory. Sarah, you look wonderful. How are you feeling? Fine, thank you. I hope you don't mind, but I've been working closely with David on some changes to the company structure. I know it was hard for you to step back from your role, but I want you to know I'm taking good care of everything. The words were perfectly pleasant, but Sarah heard the underlying message. Alexis was in charge now, and Sarah was irrelevant. I'm sure you are, Sarah replied evenly. Actually, I was hoping we could talk privately. There are some things about the company that David thought you should know. Sarah glanced around, looking for David, but he was deep in conversation with a group of investors across the terrace. Of course, Alexis led her to a quieter corner of the terrace, near the railing overlooking the city. The wind was stronger here, and Sarah felt her dress whipping around her legs. Sarah, I want to be honest with you, Alexis said, her voice dropping to a confidential tone. David is worried about you. We all are. Worried about what? Your stability, your mental health. The stress of the pregnancy has been really hard on you, and David is concerned about how it might affect your ability to, well, to be a good mother. Sarah's blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'm saying that David has been documenting some concerning behaviors. The paranoid accusations, the emotional outbursts, the attempt to leave while pregnant. He's been building a case. A case for what? Alexis's smile was sharp as a blade. For full custody of the baby after it's born. He's been consulting with lawyers. Sarah, he has evidence that you're mentally unstable, that you might be a danger to yourself and the child. Sarah felt the world tilting around her. You're lying. Am I? David loves that baby. Sarah, he wants what's best for it. And right now, He doesn't think that's you. I'm the baby's mother, and I'm going to be its stepmother." Alexis's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "You see, Sarah, David and I have been planning this for quite some time. The affair was just the beginning." Sarah backed away, but Alexis followed her toward the railing. "You're insane," Sarah whispered. "No, Sarah, you're the one who's insane. At least, that's what everyone will think after tonight." Before Sarah could react, Alexis was moving closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Did you know I'm pregnant too? 2 months along with David's child. We've been planning our future together, and it doesn't include you." Sarah's head spun. Another baby. Another woman carrying her husband's child while she'd been playing house, pretending everything was normal. "The thing is," Alexis continued, "David's been too soft with you, too willing to wait for you to crack on your own. But I'm not that patient. What do you want? I want you gone, out of David's life, out of the company, out of our way, and after tonight, that's exactly what's going to happen." Sarah realized they were alone on this section of the terrace, hidden from the main party by decorative plants and screens. The railing behind her was lower than she'd realized, barely waist high. "You see, Sarah, everyone already thinks you're unstable. One little incident tonight, one moment of pregnant woman hysteria, and David will have all the evidence he needs to prove you're unfit to be a mother. You're threatening me. I'm offering you a choice. You can walk away voluntarily, sign over custody, and disappear from our lives. Or you can make this hard on everyone." Sarah's hands moved protectively to her belly. "I'll never give up my baby." "Then you've made your choice." What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. Alexis stepped closer, and Sarah backed away instinctively. But the railing was right behind her, and as she moved, Alexis seemed to stumble, her hands reaching out as if to steady herself. But instead of grabbing Sarah's arm, Alexis's hands pushed against her shoulders. Hard. Sarah felt herself falling backward, her pregnant belly making her top heavy, her balance already precarious. The city lights spun around her as she went over the railing, her scream echoing across the terrace. The last thing she saw before hitting the ground was Alexis's face, looking down at her with cold calculation, already transforming into an expression of shocked concern. Sarah landed hard in the decorative hedge garden 3 stories below, branches tearing at her dress and skin. Pain shot through her body, but she was conscious, aware, alive. Above her, she could hear Alexis screaming, "Help someone, help, Sarah fell!" Footsteps thundered across the terrace, voices shouting in panic. David's voice, thick with concern. "Sarah, oh God, Sarah." As people gathered around her, as paramedics were called, as David knelt beside her checking for injuries, Sarah saw Alexis in the crowd above. She was crying, playing the concerned colleague perfectly, accepting comfort from the other guests. "What happened?" David asked, his voice breaking. "She was upset," Alexis said, her voice carrying down to where Sarah lay. "She was talking about feeling trapped, about wanting to escape. She was standing too close to the railing, and she seemed disoriented. I tried to help her, but she lost her balance." Sarah tried to speak, tried to tell them what had really happened, but her voice came out as a whisper. The paramedics were there now, checking her vitals, stabilizing her neck, preparing to move her. "The baby," Sarah managed to say. "Is the baby okay?" "We're going to take good care of both of you," the paramedic said. "Just try to stay calm." As they loaded her onto a stretcher, Sarah caught David's eye. For just a moment, she saw something there. Not relief that she was alive, but disappointment that she'd survived. The pieces clicked together in her mind. Alexis hadn't been acting alone. David had known. Maybe he'd even planned it. The perfect solution to his problem. A tragic accident that would leave him free to start his new life with Alexis and their baby. But Sarah had survived, and now she knew exactly what she was fighting against. As the ambulance rushed her to the hospital, Sarah made a silent promise to her unborn child. She would survive this. She would protect them both. And she would make sure that David and Alexis paid for what they'd done. The war they'd started was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. The hospital room was a prison of white walls and beeping machines. Sarah lay propped up in bed, her body aching from the fall, but her baby mercifully unharmed. The doctors had called it a miracle. 3 stories onto concrete, cushioned only by decorative hedges, and both mother and child had survived without serious injury. But as Sarah lay there, watching the parade of concerned visitors, she began to understand that surviving the fall might have been the easy part. "Thank God you're okay," David said, holding her hand as Dr. Peterson finished her examination. "When I saw you fall, I thought I'd lost you both." His performance was flawless, Sarah realized. The devoted husband, terrified of losing his wife and child. She studied his face, looking for cracks in the mask, but found none. "What exactly happened up there?" Dr. Peterson asked. "The reports are a bit unclear." Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but David answered first. "Sarah's been under enormous stress with the pregnancy. She's been having some episodes, paranoid thoughts, emotional outbursts. Last night she seemed disoriented, talking about feeling trapped." "I wasn't disoriented," Sarah said firmly. "I was pushed." The silence in the room was deafening. Dr. Peterson looked between them, her expression carefully neutral. "Pushed?" she asked gently. "Alexis pushed me. She told me she was pregnant with David's baby, and then she pushed me over the railing." David's grip on her hand tightened. "Sarah, honey, you're confused. You fell. Multiple witnesses saw you fall. Because she pushed me. Sarah, you were standing alone by the railing. Alexis was across the terrace when it happened. She ran over to help after you fell." Sarah stared at him. "That's not what happened." "Dr. Peterson," David said, his voice full of concerned husband authority. "Is it possible that the fall caused some confusion? Maybe some memory issues? Head injuries can sometimes cause confusion about events," Dr. Peterson said carefully. "But Sarah, you seem very clear about what you remember." "I am clear. I remember everything." But even as she said it, Sarah could see the doubt in Dr. Peterson's eyes. She could see the way David was looking at her, with pity and concern, as if she were a fragile mental patient. "I think we should have a psychiatric evaluation," David said. "Just to be safe. The stress of the pregnancy, the fall, her recent paranoid episodes. I'm worried about postpartum psychosis." "I'm not psychotic," Sarah said, her voice rising. "I'm telling you what happened." "Sarah, calm down," David said soothingly. "Getting upset like this isn't good for the baby." Dr. Peterson was writing notes, and Sarah could see her medical future being decided in those scribbled words. Stressed pregnancy, paranoid ideation, possible psychiatric issues. "I want to speak to Dr. Peterson privately," Sarah said. "Of course," David said. "I'll go get us some coffee." After he left, Sarah leaned forward urgently. "Dr. Peterson, you have to listen to me. My husband is having an affair with his assistant. She pushed me off that terrace. This isn't paranoia or pregnancy hormones. This is real." Dr. Peterson sat down, her expression kind but cautious. "Sarah, I can see you're very upset, but the reports from the scene are consistent. You were alone by the railing, you seemed disoriented, and you fell. Ms. Blackwood was across the terrace when it happened. She's lying. They're all lying. Sarah, is it possible that you're under more stress than you realized? Sometimes our minds can play tricks on us when we're overwhelmed." Sarah felt the walls closing in. Even her doctor, a woman she'd trusted for years, was questioning her sanity. "I need to go home," Sarah said. "I need to think. I'm going to discharge you tomorrow, but I want you to see Dr. Martinez, the psychiatrist David mentioned. And Sarah, I'm extending your bed rest indefinitely. No stress, no excitement, no going out. That night, as Sarah lay in the hospital bed, she heard David on the phone in the hallway. His voice was low, but she could catch fragments. No, she's fine, physically, but the mental state is concerning. Yes, the doctor agrees. Psychiatric evaluation won't be a problem much longer. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her situation settling over her like a burial shroud. David and Alexis had planned this perfectly. They'd created a narrative of her instability, and now they were using her own reactions to that narrative as proof of her mental illness. The next morning, David brought her home to their perfect house, helping her up the stairs to their bedroom with the tenderness of a devoted husband. He'd arranged everything for her comfort: fresh flowers, her favorite books, a baby monitor so he could hear if she needed anything. "I've hired a nurse to help take care of you," he said, fluffing her pillows. "Her name is Monica. She comes highly recommended." Sarah watched him move around their bedroom, this man she'd loved and trusted for 6 years, and realized she was looking at a stranger. How long had he been planning this? How long had he been building his case against her? Monica arrived that afternoon, a stern-faced woman in her 50s who spoke in clipped, professional tones. She took Sarah's vital signs, dispensed her medications, and made notes on a clipboard that she kept carefully out of Sarah's sight. "I don't need a nurse," Sarah protested. "Dr. Peterson insists," Monica replied. "After your fall, you need careful monitoring." But Sarah noticed how Monica always seemed to be watching her, how she appeared whenever Sarah made a phone call, how she reported back to David every evening about Sarah's condition. Days blended into weeks. Sarah was confined to bed, monitored constantly, her every word and action scrutinized for signs of instability. When she tried to call her sister, Monica was there, hovering nearby. When she attempted to use her laptop, David suggested she needed rest, not stimulation. "I found some concerning things in your browser history," David said one evening, his voice full of hurt concern. "You've been researching divorce lawyers, Sarah, and domestic violence resources." "I was just looking at options. Options for what we're having a baby together. We're a family." "A family doesn't usually include your mistress." David's expression didn't change. "Sarah, we've talked about this. There is no mistress. These paranoid thoughts are exactly what Dr. Martinez is worried about." Sarah stared at him. "I saw the messages. David, I saw the hotel bills. You saw business communications and routine company expenses. Your pregnancy has made you suspicious of perfectly innocent interactions." He was so smooth, so confident in his lies, that Sarah almost believed him. Almost. "Dr. Martinez thinks you might benefit from some medication," David continued. "Something to help with the anxiety and paranoid thoughts." "I don't want medication." "Sarah, you fell off a building because you were having paranoid delusions. You need help." The next day, Dr. Martinez came to the house, a tall, thin man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He sat beside Sarah's bed, asking careful questions about her mood, her thoughts, her feelings about the pregnancy. "I understand you've been having some concerns about your husband's fidelity," he said. "They're not concerns. They're facts." "Can you tell me about these facts?" Sarah told him about the messages, the hotel bills, the suspicious behavior. But as she spoke, she could hear how it sounded, the ramblings of a paranoid woman, seeing conspiracy where none existed. "Sarah, pregnancy can be a very stressful time. Sometimes our minds create explanations for feelings of insecurity or abandonment. It's not uncommon for women to become suspicious of their partners during this vulnerable time. This isn't pregnancy paranoia. This is real. I'd like to prescribe something to help with the anxiety, just something mild, to help you relax and focus on the baby." Sarah looked at the prescription bottle David held, the pills that would make her more compliant, more manageable, more like the broken woman they wanted her to be. "I don't want pills." "Sarah, you need to think about the baby. This level of stress isn't good for either of you. That night, Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the baby move inside her. She was trapped in her own home, medicated against her will, with a nurse who was really a spy and a husband who was building a case for her insanity. But as she lay there, Sarah remembered something her old therapist had told her years ago. Back when she'd been dealing with a difficult boss who tried to gaslight her out of her position. Trust your own reality, she'd said. When someone tries to make you doubt your own perceptions, that's when you know you're onto something important. Sarah closed her eyes and made a decision. She would play their game. She would be the compliant wife, the grateful patient, the woman who was slowly getting better under their care. But underneath, she would be gathering evidence, building her own case, preparing for war. The next morning, when David brought her the medication with breakfast, Sarah palmed the pills and pretended to swallow them. When Monica asked about her mood, Sarah smiled and said she was feeling much better. "That's wonderful," Monica said, making notes. "I'll let Dr. Martinez know you're responding well to treatment." But that night, after David had gone to his office for his important calls, Sarah quietly slipped out of bed and made her way to his study. She needed evidence, proof of what they were doing to her. What she found in his desk drawer made her blood run cold. A folder labeled Sarah Psychiatric History, filled with notes, observations, and a detailed plan for having her declared mentally incompetent. The doorknob turned, and Sarah quickly closed the drawer, slipping back toward the door. But she wasn't fast enough. "Sarah, what are you doing in here?" David stood in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to concern to something harder. "I was looking for something to read," she said weakly. "In my desk drawer. I couldn't sleep." David stepped closer, and Sarah saw the calculation in his eyes. "Sarah, you're not supposed to be out of bed. Monica said you took your medication. You should be sleeping." "I'm not tired. You're confused. The medication can sometimes cause disorientation. Let me help you back to bed." As David guided her back to the bedroom, Sarah realized her time was running out. The psychiatric evaluation was scheduled for the next week, and she had a feeling the outcome was already decided. But as she lay in bed, pretending to sleep, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. The baby was kicking, strong and regular, as if reminding her that she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for both of them, and Sarah was done being a victim. The first contraction hit Sarah at 3 a.m., sharp and intense, pulling her from the edge of sleep. She lay still, timing the pain, feeling her body preparing for the battle ahead. This wasn't false labor. Her baby was coming. "David," she whispered, shaking his shoulder gently. "David, I think it's time." He woke instantly, switching to concerned husband mode with practiced ease. "Are you sure how far apart are the contractions?" "About 10 minutes. They're getting stronger." Within an hour, they were at the hospital, Sarah gripping David's hand as another contraction rolled through her. Despite everything that had happened, despite the lies and manipulation, she couldn't help but feel a surge of love for this man who was about to become the father of her child. But as the labor progressed, Sarah began to notice things. The way David spoke to the medical staff about her condition, how he mentioned her recent psychiatric issues and medication compliance, how he positioned himself as the stable, reliable parent while painting her as fragile and unreliable. "Mrs. Mitchell has been experiencing some postpartum anxiety." She heard him tell Dr. Peterson. "We're working with Dr. Martinez to manage it." "It's not postpartum yet," Sarah wanted to say, but another contraction hit, stealing her breath and her voice. 14 hours later. Emma Sarah Mitchell entered the world. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect, screaming humanity. The moment Sarah held her daughter, something fundamental shifted inside her. This tiny person, completely dependent on her, gave her a strength she'd forgotten she possessed. "She's perfect," David said, his voice thick with emotion. And for a moment, Sarah almost believed they could find their way back to each other. But that night, as Sarah nursed Emma in her hospital bed, she overheard David on the phone in the hallway. "The baby's healthy. Sarah did well. Yes, we'll proceed with the plan. The psychiatric evaluation is scheduled for next week. Should have custody arrangements finalized within the month." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling Emma's tiny hand curl around her finger. Her daughter was barely 12 hours old, and David was already planning to take her away. "I won't let them hurt you," she whispered to Emma. "Mommy's going to protect you." The next morning, Dr. Martinez visited Sarah's hospital room. His gentle manner seemed more sinister now that she knew his true purpose. "How are you feeling, Sarah? Any unusual thoughts or feelings about the baby?" Sarah looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I love her. She's perfect." "That's wonderful. And David mentioned you've been more stable lately. The medication seems to be helping." Sarah nodded, playing the part of the grateful patient. But inside, she was making plans. They brought Emma home to the perfect nursery, to the house that had become Sarah's prison. Monica was there, ready to help with the baby. But Sarah noticed how she watched everything Sarah did with Emma, taking notes, documenting every interaction. "New mothers can sometimes have difficulty bonding," Monica mentioned to David when she thought Sarah couldn't hear. "We need to watch for signs of rejection or inappropriate attachment." But Sarah had never felt more connected to anything in her life. Emma was her anchor, her purpose, her reason to fight. When she held her daughter, Sarah felt a fierce, protective love that made her previous life seem pale by comparison. She began to plan. While nursing Emma, she would listen to David's phone calls, memorizing names and numbers. While Monica thought she was sleeping, Sarah would quietly search the house for evidence. She started keeping a journal, hidden in Emma's diaper bag, documenting everything: the conversations she overheard, the visitors who came when they thought she was resting, the phone calls that always ended when she entered a room. 1 week after Emma's birth, Sarah made a discovery that changed everything. While Monica was downstairs and David was at work, Sarah found a box in the back of David's closet. Inside were printed emails, financial records, and a detailed timeline of their plan. The affair had been going on for 8 months. The plan to have Sarah declared mentally incompetent had been in motion for 6 months. And most damning of all, there were financial records showing David had been moving money into offshore accounts, preparing for a life without Sarah. But the most chilling discovery was a recording device, a small digital recorder that had been planted in Sarah's bedroom. They'd been recording her private conversations, her phone calls, even her talks with Emma, building a case against her with her own words. Sarah photographed everything with her phone, her hands shaking as she captured evidence of the conspiracy against her. But as she was putting the box back, she heard footsteps on the stairs. "Sarah, are you okay up there?" Monica's voice was getting closer. Sarah quickly closed the closet and dove into bed, pretending to be asleep with Emma beside her. "Just checking on you," Monica said, poking her head into the room. "You seemed restless during your nap." That evening, David brought Sarah her medication as usual. But instead of palming the pills, she took them to the bathroom and spit them out, flushing them down the toilet. She needed to be clear-headed for what was coming. "Dr. Martinez wants to do a full evaluation tomorrow," David said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "To assess how you're bonding with Emma?" Sarah looked at him, this man she'd loved and trusted, and felt nothing but pity. "Of course, I want to be the best mother I can be." "I know you do, sweetheart, and we're going to make sure you get all the help you need." The next day, Dr. Martinez arrived with a team of specialists, a child psychologist, a social worker, and a family court evaluator. They observed Sarah with Emma, asked detailed questions about her feelings and thoughts, and administered psychological tests. Sarah played the part perfectly, the loving mother who was working hard to overcome her mental health challenges. She was grateful for her husband's support, appreciative of the medical care she was receiving, and completely focused on her baby's well-being. But as the evaluation progressed, Sarah began to realize something. The questions were leading, designed to elicit specific responses. The social worker was particularly interested in Sarah's paranoid thoughts about her husband's fidelity and her delusional beliefs about being pushed from the building. Sarah, do you still believe your husband is having an affair? Dr. Martinez asked. Sarah looked at David, who was watching her carefully. I think I was overwhelmed and confused. David has been so patient with me, so supportive. I can see now that I was letting my insecurities create problems that weren't there. Dr. Martinez made notes, looking pleased. And the incident at the hotel. Do you remember it differently now? I think I was so stressed and frightened that I lost my balance. It was an accident. I'm grateful that Alexis was there to help. More notes. More pleased looks exchanged between the evaluators. After they left, David seemed more relaxed than he'd been in weeks. I'm proud of you, Sarah. You're getting better. But that night, as Sarah lay in bed with Emma sleeping beside her, she heard David on the phone again. The evaluation went perfectly. She's playing right into our hands. Yes, we should have custody within the month. No, she'll never see it coming. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling Emma's tiny breath against her chest. They thought they'd broken her. They thought they'd won. But Sarah had learned something important during those weeks of enforced helplessness. She'd learned to be patient, to plan, to hide her true thoughts and feelings. She'd learned to survive, and now, with Emma to protect, she'd learned to fight. The next morning, Sarah made a phone call she'd been planning for weeks. Using Emma's scheduled feeding time as cover, she contacted the one person she hoped might believe her. Janet, it's Sarah Mitchell. I need your help. Sarah, how are you? How's the baby? She's perfect. But Janet, I need to ask you something, and I need you to trust me. You mentioned that David has been acting differently, more controlling. Yes, it's gotten worse. He's been monitoring everything, questioning everyone. Some people think he's planning something big. He is, and I need your help to stop him. Sarah quickly explained what she'd discovered, the evidence she'd found, the plan to have her declared incompetent. Janet listened in stunned silence. Sarah, this is insane. Are you sure? I have proof, photos, documents, recordings, but I need someone on the inside to help me. What do you need me to do? I need you to document everything David does at work, every meeting, every phone call, every email, and I need you to find out more about Alexis's background. I have a feeling she's done this before. After they hung up, Sarah felt a surge of energy she hadn't experienced in months. She wasn't alone anymore. She had an ally, a plan, and most importantly, she had Emma to fight for. But as she looked down at her sleeping daughter, Sarah realized the real battle was just beginning. David and Alexis thought they'd won, but they'd underestimated the power of a mother's love. They were about to discover that Sarah Mitchell wasn't the broken woman they thought she was. She was a warrior, and she was ready to fight for her child's future. 3 weeks after Emma's birth, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. She was nursing the baby in the living room when the doorbell rang, and Monica answered it with her usual efficiency. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Detective Rodriguez from the NYPD. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the incident at the Meridian Hotel. Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. Of course, please, sit down. Detective Rodriguez was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She sat across from Sarah, pulling out a small notebook. I'm following up on the incident from last month. We've had some questions raised about the circumstances of your fall. Sarah felt a surge of hope. Maybe someone had seen what really happened. Maybe there was a witness who could corroborate her story. I understand you initially claimed you were pushed, Detective Rodriguez said. But according to the medical evaluation, you later changed your statement. I was confused after the fall, Sarah said carefully, aware that Monica was hovering nearby. The trauma, the medication, it made my memories unreliable. So you're saying now that you fell accidentally? Sarah met the detective's eyes, trying to convey a message without words. I was standing too close to the railing. I lost my balance. Detective Rodriguez made notes, but Sarah caught something in her expression, a flicker of doubt, a sense that she wasn't buying the official story. Mrs. Mitchell, if you ever remember anything else about that night, anything at all, please don't hesitate to call me. She handed Sarah a business card. Sometimes memories become clearer with time. After the detective left, Sarah tucked the card into Emma's diaper bag, her pulse racing. Someone was investigating. Someone had doubts about the official story, but her hope was short-lived. That evening, David seemed unusually agitated. I heard we had a visitor today, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. A detective. She was just following up on the accident. And what did you tell her? The truth, that I fell accidentally. David studied her face carefully. Sarah, I hope you understand how important it is that we present a united front. Any suggestion that this was anything other than an accident could be very damaging to all of us. Damaging how, well, if people thought you were pushed, they might wonder about your mental state. Why would someone want to hurt you? What kind of person attracts that kind of violence? Sarah felt the familiar chill of his manipulation. Even her own victimization was being twisted into evidence of her instability. But Sarah had been busy during her supposed recovery. Janet had been feeding her information about David's activities at work, and what she learned was disturbing. David had been systematically eliminating anyone who might be loyal to Sarah, restructuring departments, and consolidating power. More importantly, Janet had discovered something crucial about Alexis's background. She's done this before, Janet whispered during one of their secret phone conversations. I found records of her previous employment. She worked for 3 different companies over the past 5 years, and each time she left, there were lawsuits, sexual harassment claims, wrongful termination suits, and in one case, a female executive who had a mysterious accident and ended up in a psychiatric facility. Sarah's blood ran cold. What kind of accident? A fall down the stairs at the office. She claimed she was pushed, but no one believed her. She was hospitalized for weeks, and when she came out, she'd lost her job and her reputation. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the pieces clicking together. Alexis wasn't just opportunistic. She was a predator, systematically targeting successful women and destroying their lives. There's more, Janet continued. I found financial records showing that David has been moving money into an account that Alexis has access to. They're planning to disappear. Sarah, once they have custody of Emma, they're going to take the money and run. That night, Sarah made a decision. She'd been playing defense for too long. It was time to go on the offense. The next morning, while David was at work and Monica was downstairs, Sarah called Detective Rodriguez. Detective, this is Sarah Mitchell. I wonder if we could meet privately. I have some information that might be relevant to your investigation. Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. Where would you like to meet? There's a coffee shop downtown, Cafe Luna. Can you meet me there in an hour? I'll be there. Sarah told Monica she had a doctor's appointment and needed to take Emma for her checkup. It was the first time she'd been alone outside the house in weeks, and the freedom felt intoxicating. Detective Rodriguez was waiting for her at a corner table, already nursing a cup of coffee. Sarah sat down, Emma sleeping peacefully in her carrier. Thank you for meeting me, Sarah said. I need to tell you the truth about what happened that night. I'm listening. Sarah told her everything. The affair, the financial manipulation, the plan to have her declared incompetent, the evidence she'd gathered. She showed Detective Rodriguez the photos she'd taken of David's documents, the recordings she'd made of his phone conversations. This is a lot to process, Detective Rodriguez said when Sarah finished. You're alleging a pretty elaborate conspiracy. I know how it sounds, but I have proof. Mrs. Mitchell, I have to ask, are you currently taking any psychiatric medication? Sarah felt her heart sink. Even the detective was questioning her mental state. I was prescribed medication, but I haven't been taking it. I need to be clear-headed to protect my daughter. And your husband doesn't know you're not taking the medication. No, I've been pretending to take it. Detective Rodriguez made notes, but Sarah could see the skepticism in her eyes. A woman who was secretly not taking her psychiatric medication, making elaborate claims about her husband's affair and attempted murder. It sounded like textbook paranoid delusion. Detective, I know how this sounds, but please just look into Alexis Blackwood's background. Look at her previous employers, the women who've worked with her. There's a pattern. I'll look into it, Detective Rodriguez said, but her tone was non-committal. Sarah left the cafe feeling deflated. Even with evidence, even with documentation, she couldn't overcome the narrative that had been built around her mental instability. But as she drove home, Sarah's phone rang. It was Janet, and she sounded panicked. Sarah, you need to know something. David knows about our phone calls. He's been monitoring the company phones, and he heard our conversation yesterday. Sarah's blood turned to ice. What? He called me into his office this morning. He fired me. Sarah said I was spreading malicious rumors and interfering with his family's recovery. Janet, I'm so sorry. That's not the worst part. He's planning something for tonight. I overheard him talking to Alexis about accelerating the timeline. They're worried that you're getting too stable, too credible. Sarah's mind raced. What kind of timeline? I don't know, but Sarah, you need to be careful. They're not going to wait for the courts anymore. They're going to make something happen. After Janet hung up, Sarah sat in her car, Emma sleeping beside her, and realized the net was closing around her. David knew she'd been investigating him. He knew she'd been building a case against him, and he was going to act before she could expose him. That afternoon, Sarah made a desperate phone call to her sister. Lisa, I need you to take Emma for a few days. What? Why? I can't explain everything right now, but I'm in danger. Emma's in danger. I need to know she's safe. Honest, Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going on? David is not who we thought he was. He's been planning to take Emma away from me, and I think he's going to try something tonight. Sarah, honey, are you taking your medication? You sound paranoid. Even her own sister. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of months of careful manipulation. Please, Lisa, just take Emma for one night. If I'm wrong, if I'm being paranoid, then you can bring her back tomorrow and I'll get help. But if I'm right, okay, Lisa said finally. Bring her over. But Sarah, if you're having some kind of breakdown, you need to get help. That evening, Sarah told David that Emma was staying with Lisa because she'd been feeling overwhelmed and needed a break. David seemed pleased by this development. That's very mature of you. Sarah, recognizing when you need help is a sign of progress. But Sarah noticed how quickly he made a phone call after dinner, how he seemed to be confirming plans with someone. Around 10 p.m., Sarah heard a car in the driveway. She looked out the window to see Alexis getting out of a black sedan, her face grim and determined. Sarah quickly texted Detective Rodriguez. They're here. Something's happening. If anything happens to me, look at Alexis Blackwood. Then she deleted the message from her phone and waited. The front door opened, and Sarah heard voices downstairs. David and Alexis, talking in low, urgent tones. Sarah crept to the top of the stairs, straining to hear. Has to be tonight. Detective was asking questions. She's been talking to people. Make it look like suicide, postpartum depression, history of mental illness. Sarah's blood turned to ice. They were planning to kill her and make it look like she'd taken her own life. She quickly grabbed the small recorder she'd hidden in Emma's room and started recording, capturing their conversation from the hallway. Note is already written. Her handwriting. Can't raise a child in her condition. Custody will be automatic. Money transferred. New identities ready. Sarah had heard enough. She quickly went to her bedroom and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Sarah Mitchell at 1247 Maple Street. My husband and his lover are planning to kill me. They're in my house right now. Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? Yes, please send help. Officers are en route. Can you get to a safe location? Sarah heard footsteps on the stairs. They're coming up. I have to go. She hung up and quickly hid the recorder in Emma's diaper bag, then lay down on the bed, pretending to be asleep. The bedroom door opened, and David entered with Alexis behind him. Sarah. David's voice was gentle, concerned. Are you awake? Sarah kept her eyes closed, her breathing steady. She's out, Alexis said. The medication should keep her unconscious for a few hours. Long enough, David replied. Sarah felt the bed dip as David sat beside her. I'm sorry it came to this. Sarah, but you left us no choice. Through slitted eyes, Sarah saw Alexis pull a syringe from her purse. This will make it look like an overdose. Combined with the suicide note, it'll be convincing. What about the baby? Emma will be better off without her. We'll give her a stable home, a normal life. Sarah felt the needle pierce her arm and forced herself to remain still as they injected her with whatever was in the syringe. But as the drug hit her system, she began to feel drowsy, her thoughts becoming fuzzy. It's working, Alexis said. Help me get her to the bathroom. We'll make it look like she took pills and drowned in the tub. But as they lifted Sarah's supposedly unconscious body, the front door burst open downstairs. Police, NYPD. David and Alexis froze, looking at each other with panic in their eyes. How did they know? David whispered. It doesn't matter, Alexis said. We stick to the story. She was trying to hurt herself, and we were trying to save her. But Sarah, despite the drugs coursing through her system, managed to speak. Too late, she whispered. I recorded everything. The look of horror on their faces was the last thing Sarah saw before the drug took hold and consciousness slipped away. Sarah woke up in a hospital bed, her head pounding and her mouth dry as cotton. The fluorescent lights were too bright, and for a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. Sarah, can you hear me? She turned her head to see Detective Rodriguez sitting beside her bed, looking concerned but alert. What happened? Sarah's voice came out as a croak. You were drugged. Your husband and Alexis Blackwood were arrested at your house last night. They're being charged with attempted murder. The memories came flooding back. The conversation she'd overheard. The syringe. The plan to make her death look like suicide. Sarah sat up too quickly, making her head spin. Emma, where's Emma? She's safe. She's with your sister. Child Services is involved, but given the circumstances, she'll stay with family while this is sorted out. Sarah felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Emma was safe. That was all that mattered. The recording, she said suddenly. Did you find the recording? Yes, we did. It's being analyzed by our tech team, but from what we've heard so far, it's pretty damning evidence. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. Sarah, I owe you an apology. When you first told me about the conspiracy, I thought you might be experiencing some kind of breakdown. The story seemed too elaborate, too calculated. But it was calculated. They'd been planning this for months. We're discovering that. We've been looking into Alexis Blackwood's background, and you were right. She's done this before. 3 other women in 3 different cities, all successful executives, all ended up losing their jobs, their reputations, some their lives. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction. Finally, someone believed her. What happens now? Now we build a case? David and Alexis are being held without bail. The attempted murder charges are serious, but we're also looking at fraud, conspiracy, and a whole host of other charges. Over the next few days, as Sarah recovered from the drugs in her system, the full scope of David and Alexis's plan became clear. They'd been siphoning money from the company for months, building false evidence of Sarah's mental instability, and planning to disappear with Emma and millions in stolen funds. Dr. Martinez, it turned out, had been unknowingly complicit. He'd been given false information about Sarah's condition and had prescribed treatment based on David's lies. When he learned the truth, he was horrified. I'm so sorry, Sarah, he said when he visited her in the hospital. I should have questioned the information I was given. I should have been more thorough in my evaluation. You believed what you were told by someone you trusted? Sarah said. That's not your fault. But Sarah knew it would take time to rebuild her reputation, to undo the damage that had been done to her credibility and her relationships. The first step was getting Emma back. Child services had been involved because of the allegations of Sarah's mental instability, but with the truth now revealed, they were working to reunite mother and daughter. We need to be sure you're stable and capable of caring for the child, the social worker, Mrs. Chen explained. Given everything that's happened, we want to make sure Emma's well-being is protected. Sarah underwent extensive psychological evaluation, this time with doctors who weren't influenced by David's lies. The results were clear. She was mentally stable, had never shown signs of the conditions David had claimed, and was fully capable of caring for her daughter. 2 weeks after her hospitalization, Sarah was finally reunited with Emma, holding her daughter again, feeling her tiny weight and breathing in her sweet baby scent. Sarah felt whole for the first time in months. Lisa had been caring for Emma at Sarah's house, and as they sat in the nursery, Sarah's sister looked at her with new understanding. I'm sorry I didn't believe you, Lisa said quietly. I thought David was such a good man, such a devoted husband. The idea that he could do those things, it seemed impossible. He fooled everyone, Sarah said, adjusting Emma's blanket. That was his talent, being charming, believable, trustworthy. Even I didn't see the real him until it was almost too late. What will you do now? Sarah had been thinking about that. Her old life was gone. The house, the marriage, the comfortable suburban existence. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. I'm going to rebuild, she said. I'm going to start over. But this time, I'm going to do it on my own terms. The legal proceedings moved quickly, with the recording evidence and the testimony of witnesses who'd seen David and Alexis's behavior. The prosecution had a strong case. David was facing charges of attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Alexis was facing similar charges, plus the revelation of her pattern of behavior with other victims. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of being both victim and star witness. She had to testify about the months of manipulation, the financial abuse, the attempt on her life. It was painful, but also cathartic. Mrs. Mitchell, the prosecutor asked during her testimony, what made you realize you needed to fight back? Sarah looked at the jury, these 12 strangers who would help determine her family's future. It was when Emma was born, she said. I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for my daughter's future, for her right to have a mother who was strong and free and truthful. I couldn't let them win, because that would have meant Emma grew up thinking that manipulation and lies were normal, that women should accept abuse as the price of security. The courtroom was silent as Sarah continued. I used to think that being a good wife meant being supportive and trusting and putting my husband's needs first, but I learned that real love doesn't require you to surrender your reality, your independence, or your safety. And I wanted my daughter to learn that lesson too. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Sarah watched from the gallery as the evidence was presented, as witnesses testified about David's manipulative behavior and Alexis's pattern of targeting successful women. She saw the jury's expressions change as they understood the scope of the conspiracy against her. When the verdict came in, guilty on all counts for both defendants, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but it couldn't give her back the months of fear and isolation, the damage to her relationships, the trauma of nearly losing everything. But as she walked out of the courthouse, Emma in her arms, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She'd survived. She'd fought back. She'd protected her daughter and exposed the truth. And now, for the first time in months, the future felt full of possibilities instead of threats. That night, in her new apartment, smaller than the suburban house but genuinely hers, Sarah sat in the rocking chair she'd saved from the nursery, nursing Emma and thinking about what came next. She'd received job offers from 3 different companies, executives who'd heard her story and wanted to hire someone with her courage and determination. She'd also been contacted by a publisher interested in her story, and by women's organizations who wanted her to speak about domestic abuse and psychological manipulation. "What do you think, little one?" Sarah said to Emma, who was gazing up at her with bright, alert eyes. "Should mommy write a book? Should we help other women who are going through what we went through?" Emma made a small noise, and Sarah chose to interpret it as approval. As she sat there, Sarah thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Trusting, dependent, willing to sacrifice her own needs for the sake of peace. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more independent, more aware of her own worth. It hadn't been an easy transformation. Sarah wouldn't wish the experience on anyone. But she'd learned something valuable. She was capable of surviving things she'd never imagined she could endure. She was stronger than she'd ever known. And most importantly, she'd learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept the unacceptable, even when it would be easier to stay quiet and keep the peace. Emma fell asleep in her arms, and Sarah carefully carried her to the crib in the bedroom they shared. As she tucked her daughter in, Sarah made a silent promise. Emma would grow up knowing that women are strong, that love doesn't require surrender, and that the truth is always worth fighting for, no matter how difficult the fight might be. The war was over. Sarah had won. And now, finally, she was free to build the life she wanted, on her own terms. 6 months after the trial, Sarah sat in her new office at Chen Marketing Solutions, looking over the quarterly reports with a satisfaction she'd never felt in her old life. Robert Chen had not only given her a job, but had made her a partner, recognizing her talent and her unique perspective on resilience in the face of adversity. "The Morrison campaign is performing 40% above expectations," Robert said, reviewing the numbers with her. "Your approach to authentic storytelling is exactly what brands need right now." Sarah smiled, feeling the familiar rush of professional accomplishment. She'd forgotten how much she loved the challenge of building campaigns, solving problems, creating something meaningful. "I learned the hard way that people can sense authenticity," she said. "They know when a story is real and when it's manufactured." Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Emma took her first steps today. Can't wait to show you the video." Sarah's heart swelled with pride and gratitude. Emma was thriving with Lisa's family while Sarah rebuilt her career and her life. It was a temporary arrangement, but it was working for everyone involved. But as successful as Sarah's new life was becoming, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. David and Alexis were both serving long prison sentences, but the companies they defrauded were still struggling to recover. The other women Alexis had victimized were still dealing with the aftermath of her manipulation. That evening, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Linda Castillo. I was one of Alexis Blackwood's victims. I read about your case in the news and I wanted to thank you." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "Ms. Castillo, I remember your case from the police reports. You were the executive who fell down the stairs." "Yes, and like you, I was told I was crazy, that I was imagining things. My life was destroyed. I lost my job, my reputation, my family. I spent 2 years in therapy trying to rebuild my sense of reality. I'm so sorry you went through that. But because of your courage, because you fought back and exposed the truth, I'm finally getting some closure. The FBI contacted me. They're reopening my case. They think they can prove that Alexis orchestrated my accident too." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm glad something good is coming from all of this. There's something else. I've been in touch with the other victims. We're thinking about starting a foundation, something to help women who've been victimized by this kind of psychological manipulation. We want to call it the Sarah Mitchell Foundation." Sarah was stunned. "You want to name it after me? You're the one who broke the pattern. You're the one who fought back and won. You saved not just yourself, but probably prevented Alexis from destroying more lives." After they hung up, Sarah sat in her apartment, looking at the photos of Emma on her coffee table. She'd been so focused on rebuilding her own life that she hadn't thought about the broader impact of her story. But as she considered Linda's proposal, Sarah realized this was exactly what she'd been searching for, a way to turn her trauma into something meaningful, something that could help other women. The next morning, Sarah called her publisher. Rachel, I want to expand the book. I want to include the stories of the other women Alexis victimized. I want to create a resource guide for women dealing with psychological manipulation and abuse. Sarah, that's a wonderful idea. But are you sure you want to revisit all of this? You've worked so hard to move forward. I'm not revisiting it. I'm using it. There's a difference. Over the next few months, Sarah threw herself into the project with the same determination she'd once applied to survival. She interviewed dozens of women who'd experienced similar manipulation, talked to experts in psychology and law enforcement, and created a comprehensive guide to recognizing and fighting back against psychological abuse. The book, titled Surviving the Narcissist, a guide to recognizing and escaping psychological manipulation, became an instant bestseller. Sarah found herself traveling the country, speaking to women's groups, appearing on talk shows, and consulting with law enforcement agencies about these crimes. But the most meaningful moment came when she was reunited with Emma permanently. The courts had finally cleared all the custody issues, and Sarah was able to bring her daughter home to their new life. "Welcome home, baby girl," Sarah said, carrying Emma into their apartment. "This is where we're going to build our new life together." Emma, now 8 months old and crawling everywhere, seemed to approve of the space. She explored every corner, babbling happily as Sarah watched with wonder. That evening, as Sarah was giving Emma a bath, her phone rang. It was Detective Rodriguez. "Sarah, I thought you'd want to know. We got a call from the FBI. They're opening a federal investigation into Alexis Blackwood's activities. They think she may have victimized women in other states too. How many women? They're not sure yet, but your case broke open something much bigger than we initially realized. You may have saved dozens of women from going through what you experienced." After they hung up, Sarah looked at Emma, who was splashing happily in the tub. "You know what? Little one mommy's story isn't over yet. We're just getting started." The Sarah Mitchell Foundation officially launched 6 months later, with Sarah as the founding president and Linda Castillo as the executive director. They provided legal resources, psychological support, and financial assistance to women dealing with psychological manipulation and abuse. The foundation's first major initiative was a training program for law enforcement officers, teaching them to recognize the signs of psychological abuse and to understand why victims often seem unreliable or unstable. The goal isn't just to help women escape these situations, Sarah explained to the officers during one training session. It's to change the system that allows these predators to operate. When we dismiss women's concerns as hysteria or paranoia, we're enabling the abuse. Sarah also started a support group for women in similar situations, meeting every week in the community center near her apartment. The group grew from 5 women to over 30, and Sarah found that helping others helped her continue to heal. One evening, as Sarah was leading the support group, a young woman raised her hand. "Sarah, I have a question. How do you know when you're being too paranoid? How do you know when your concerns are legitimate and when you're just being oversensitive?" Sarah looked around the circle of faces, women of all ages and backgrounds who'd been victimized by similar manipulation. "Trust your instincts," she said. "If something feels wrong, it probably is. The people who love you should never make you doubt your own reality. And if someone is trying to convince you that you're crazy, that's usually a sign that you're actually seeing something very clearly." After the meeting, Sarah walked home through the city streets, pushing Emma in her stroller. The autumn air was crisp, and the lights of the city twinkled around them. "You know what, Emma," Sarah said, looking down at her daughter. "I think we're going to be okay. More than okay, I think we're going to be amazing." Emma babbled in response, and Sarah chose to interpret it as agreement. As they reached their apartment building, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, She'd been a broken woman, trapped in a house with a man who'd been planning to destroy her. Now she was a successful businesswoman, a best-selling author, the founder of a foundation that was helping women across the country. But most importantly, she was Emma's mother, and she was raising her daughter to be strong, independent, and unafraid to fight for what was right. The nightmare was over. The real life was just beginning. 2 years after the trial, Sarah was living the life she'd always dreamed of, but never dared to hope for. Her book had become a bestseller. The foundation was thriving, and Emma was a happy, healthy toddler who filled every day with laughter and wonder. Sarah had even begun dating again, carefully, slowly, with a man named Marcus who was a therapist specializing in trauma recovery. He understood her story, respected her boundaries, and seemed genuinely committed to supporting her healing journey. "I never thought I'd be able to trust anyone again," Sarah told Dr. Vasquez during one of their sessions. "But Marcus is different. He doesn't try to fix me or manage me. He just accepts me. That's what healthy love looks like," Dr. Vasquez replied. "It's not about control or possession. It's about mutual respect and support." Sarah nodded, feeling grateful for the therapy that had helped her rebuild her sense of self-worth and her ability to form healthy relationships. But even as her life flourished, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows. David and Alexis were both serving long prison sentences, but Sarah had learned to be cautious, to pay attention to her instincts. Those instincts proved correct when she received a call from Detective Rodriguez on a Tuesday morning in March. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. Alexis Blackwood is being released from prison next month." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "What? How is that possible? She was sentenced to 15 years. "She's being released early for good behavior. And Sarah, there's something else. She's been corresponding with someone on the outside, someone who's been helping her plan for her release. Who? We don't know yet. The letters are being sent through a lawyer, so they're privileged communication. But Sarah, I think you need to be careful. Take some precautions." That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment, watching Emma play with her toys, trying to process this news. She'd thought this chapter of her life was closed, that she and Emma were finally safe. But apparently, the story wasn't over. Sarah called Marcus, her voice shaking as she explained the situation. "I'll come over," he said immediately. "You and Emma shouldn't be alone right now." "Marcus, I can't ask you to get involved in this. It's dangerous." Sarah, you're not asking. I'm offering. We're together now, which means your safety is my priority too." As Sarah waited for Marcus to arrive, she went through her apartment, checking locks, closing curtains, making sure everything was secure. She hated feeling this way again. Paranoid, hypervigilant, afraid. Emma sensed her tension and began to fuss, reaching up to be held. Sarah scooped her up, kissing her forehead. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's just being careful." Marcus arrived within an hour, bringing takeout dinner and a calm presence that helped Sarah feel less alone. They ate together, Emma babbling happily in her high chair, and for a moment, Sarah almost felt normal again. But that night, as they were putting Emma to bed, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "Don't answer it," Marcus said, but Sarah was already reaching for the phone. "Hello, Sarah." The voice was familiar, cold and filled with a hatred that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Did you miss me? Alexis. I told you I'd be back. I told you this wasn't over." Sarah's hands were shaking. "You're supposed to be in prison. Not anymore. And Sarah, I've had 2 years to think about what you did to me. 2 years to plan my revenge. What do you want?" "I want my life back. The life you destroyed. The man you stole from me. The future you ruined." David made his own choices. David was weak. He would have chosen me if you hadn't interfered. But don't worry, Sarah. I'm not going to make the same mistakes I made before. This time, I'm going to be much more direct. The line went dead, and Sarah stared at the phone, her heart racing. "What did she say?" Marcus asked. She's coming for me. For us. Sarah immediately called Detective Rodriguez, but there was little the police could do. Alexis hadn't made any specific threats, and as long as she stayed away from Sarah and Emma, she wasn't technically violating any laws. We can increase patrols in your neighborhood, Detective Rodriguez said, and I'll put a trace on your phone in case she calls again. But Sarah, you might want to consider taking Emma somewhere safe until we can figure out what Alexis is planning. That night, Sarah packed a bag for herself and Emma, and they went to stay with Lisa and her family. It felt like a step backward, like returning to the fear and helplessness she'd worked so hard to overcome. But as she tucked Emma into the portable crib in Lisa's guest room, Sarah realized something important. She wasn't the same woman who'd been terrorized 2 years ago. She was stronger now, more confident, more aware of her own power. She wasn't going to run and hide. She was going to fight. The next morning, Sarah called her lawyer. I want to know everything about Alexis's release. Who authorized it? Who's been corresponding with her? What are the terms of her parole? Sarah, I understand you're concerned, but maybe you should focus on protecting yourself and Emma rather than investigating Alexis. I can't protect us if I don't know what we're up against. Sarah also called the foundation office, asking Linda to research any recent activity that might be connected to Alexis. She reached out to her network of contacts in law enforcement, media, and the business world, building a web of information and support. Within 48 hours, Sarah had a clearer picture of the threat they were facing. Alexis had been released 3 weeks early due to overcrowding in the prison system. She'd been corresponding with a man named Robert Sterling, who ran a private investigation firm and had been helping her build a new identity. More disturbing, Linda had discovered that someone had been asking questions about Sarah's schedule, her daughter's daycare, her home address. Someone was preparing for something. Sarah, I think you need to disappear for a while, Detective Rodriguez said when she called with this information. Take Emma and go somewhere safe until we can figure out what's happening. But Sarah had made her decision. No, I'm not running anymore. I'm not letting her destroy the life I've built. That afternoon, Sarah went to see Dr. Vasquez. I need to face this, she said. I need to confront Alexis and end this once and for all. Sarah, that sounds very dangerous. Are you sure you're not letting your anger override your judgment? I'm sure 2 years ago, I was a victim. I was powerless, isolated, and afraid. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm strong enough to face her now. Dr. Vasquez studied her carefully. What exactly are you planning to do? I'm going to meet with her. I'm going to find out what she wants and put an end to this. Sarah, that's exactly what she wants. She's trying to draw you into a confrontation. Then I'll be ready for it. That evening, Sarah called the number Alexis had used to contact her. I want to meet, she said when Alexis answered. Just you and me. I was wondering when you'd call. I was starting to think you'd lost your nerve. Tomorrow night, the rooftop of the Meridian Hotel, where this all started. How poetic. Midnight. Midnight. After she hung up, Sarah looked at Marcus, who'd been listening to the conversation with growing alarm. Sarah, you can't be serious. This is insane. This is necessary. She's never going to stop until one of us is dead. I'd rather face her on my terms than spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Then I'm coming with you. No, this is between me and her, and Marcus. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. If something happens to me, I need you to take care of Emma. I need you to tell her that her mother loved her enough to fight for her future. Marcus pulled Sarah into his arms, holding her tight. Nothing's going to happen to you because you're not going alone. I'll be there, watching from a distance, and so will the police. Sarah nodded, feeling grateful for his support, but knowing that ultimately, this was her fight to finish. The next evening, Sarah stood on the rooftop of the Meridian Hotel, looking out over the city lights. She was wearing a wire, and Detective Rodriguez was positioned in a nearby building with a sniper's scope, ready to intervene if necessary. At exactly midnight, Alexis appeared from the stairwell. She looked older, harder, but her eyes burned with the same cold hatred Sarah remembered. "Hello, Sarah. You look good. Success suits you. What do you want, Alexis? I want you to know that you haven't won. You may have destroyed my life, but I'm going to destroy yours too. My life isn't destroyed. I'm happy. I'm successful. I have a beautiful daughter and a man who loves me. For now, but accidents happen. Sarah, children get sick. Businesses fail. Men leave." Sarah felt the familiar chill of Alexis's manipulation, but this time, she was ready for it. "Are you threatening my daughter? I'm just saying that life is fragile, and you have so much to lose now. So do you. I have nothing left to lose. That's what makes me dangerous." Sarah stepped closer, her voice steady and strong. "You're wrong about that. You have your freedom. And if you threaten my daughter, if you come anywhere near my family, you'll lose that too." "Are you threatening me? I'm promising you, I'm not the same woman you tried to destroy 2 years ago. I'm stronger now, smarter, and I have resources you can't imagine. If you want to restart this war, I'll finish it." Alexis smiled, but Sarah could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "You think you're so tough now, but you're still just a suburban housewife who got lucky. I'm a survivor, I'm a fighter, and I'm Emma's mother. That makes me more dangerous than you'll ever be." For a moment, the two women stood facing each other on the rooftop, the city sprawling below them, the wind whipping around them. Then Alexis made her move. She lunged forward, a knife appearing in her hand as if from nowhere. But Sarah was ready. She dodged to the side, and Alexis stumbled past her, off balance. "It's over, Alexis," Sarah said, backing away. "The police heard everything. You just threatened my life and my daughter's life." But Alexis wasn't finished. She turned, the knife still in her hand, and started toward Sarah again. "You destroyed my life," she screamed. "You took everything from me. You destroyed your own life. You made your choices. I'm going to make you pay." But as Alexis raised the knife, she heard the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Detective Rodriguez and two other officers burst through the door, weapons drawn. "Drop the knife now." Alexis looked around wildly, realizing she was trapped. For a moment, Sarah thought she might surrender. Instead, Alexis turned back to Sarah, the knife raised high. "If I can't have my life back, then you don't get yours either." But Sarah was no longer the helpless victim Alexis remembered. She stepped forward, grabbed Alexis's wrist, and used her momentum to send her stumbling backward. This time, when Alexis fell, Sarah was ready. She had planned for this moment, prepared for it, and when it came, she was strong enough to survive it. Alexis hit the ground hard, the knife clattering away across the rooftop. The officers were there instantly, restraining her, reading her rights. "It's over," Detective Rodriguez said to Sarah. "She's going back to prison, and this time, she won't be getting out." Sarah looked down at Alexis, who was crying now, her mask of control finally slipping away. "I'm sorry your life didn't turn out the way you wanted," Sarah said quietly. "But you can't blame me for the choices you made." As the officers led Alexis away, Sarah stood alone on the rooftop, feeling the weight of the past 2 years settling on her shoulders. She had survived. She had protected her daughter. She had won. But more than that, she had become the woman she was meant to be. Strong, independent, unafraid to fight for what was right. The nightmare was finally over, and Sarah Mitchell was free. 3 years had passed since that confrontation on the rooftop. Sarah stood in her corner office at Mitchell Chen Marketing, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The company she'd built with Robert Chen had become one of the most successful boutique firms in the city, specializing in authentic storytelling and crisis management. Emma, now 5 years old, was thriving in kindergarten, a bright, confident child who showed no signs of the trauma that had surrounded her early life. She had Marcus's steady presence in her life, along with Sarah's fierce protection, and she was growing up knowing that she was loved and safe. "Mommy, look what I drew." Emma burst into Sarah's office, holding up a crayon drawing of their family. Sarah, Emma, and Marcus standing in front of their new house in Westchester. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah said, lifting Emma into her arms. "Tell me about it." "That's our house, and that's our dog Buster, and that's you and me and Marcus. We're all smiling because we're happy." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Emma's innocent perspective on their life was exactly what she'd fought for, a child who knew stability, love, and safety. "Are you ready to go home?" Sarah asked. "Yes, Marcus is making spaghetti tonight." As they drove to their house, a modest colonial that Sarah had chosen specifically because it felt like home rather than a showplace, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. She'd married Marcus the previous year in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Emma had been their flower girl, delighted to be part of making their family official. David was still in prison, serving a 20-year sentence for attempted murder and fraud. He tried to reach out to Sarah several times, claiming he wanted to apologize, to explain, to make amends, but Sarah had no interest in his explanations. She'd built her life around moving forward, not looking back. Alexis had been sentenced to life in prison without parole after the rooftop incident. The knife attack had been the final straw, and combined with the evidence of her previous crimes, she would never be free again. The Sarah Mitchell Foundation had expanded to include offices in 12 cities, helping thousands of women escape psychological abuse and manipulation. Sarah's book had been translated into 15 languages, and she'd become a sought-after speaker on the topic of resilience and recovery. But the achievement Sarah was most proud of was the family she'd built. Emma had two parents who loved her unconditionally, a stable home, and the knowledge that she was safe and valued. "How was your day?" Marcus asked as they walked into the house. He was already starting dinner, and the smell of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen. "Good, we landed the Morrison account, and I had a great call with the publisher about the second book." "And how was school?" "Emma, I learned about butterflies. They start as caterpillars, and then they change into something beautiful." Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look. "That's called transformation," Sarah said. "Sometimes we all go through changes that make us stronger and more beautiful." After dinner, as Marcus helped Emma with her homework, Sarah went to her home office to work on her second book. This one was about rebuilding after trauma, about creating a life of purpose and meaning from the ashes of destruction. She was deep in writing when the doorbell rang. Sarah glanced at the clock. It was 9 p.m., late for unexpected visitors. "I'll get it," Marcus called from the living room. Sarah heard the door open, followed by muffled conversation. Something in Marcus's tone made her pause, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Sarah," Marcus called, "could you come here? Please." Sarah walked to the front door to find Marcus talking to a young woman who looked vaguely familiar. She was about 25, with dark hair and nervous eyes. "Sarah Mitchell?" the woman asked. "My name is Rebecca Sterling. I think we need to talk." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Sterling. That was the name of the private investigator who'd been helping Alexis. "What do you want?" Sarah asked. "I'm Robert Sterling's daughter, and I have something that belongs to you." Rebecca held out a sealed envelope with Sarah's name written on it in familiar handwriting. Sarah's heart sank as she recognized the writing. "It's from Alexis," Rebecca said. "She asked me to deliver it to you personally." Sarah stared at the envelope, her hands shaking slightly. "She's in prison. How did she—" "She's dead," Rebecca said quietly. "She died 3 weeks ago. Suicide. But before she died, she asked me to bring this to you." Sarah felt Marcus's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. She took the envelope, her mind racing. "Why you?" she asked. "Why would she trust you with this?" "Because I know what she did to you, and I know what my father did to help her." Rebecca's voice was filled with shame. "I wanted to apologize. My father was dying when Alexis contacted him from prison. She convinced him to help her one last time, and he was too weak to refuse. What kind of help? She had him research everyone in your life, your routine, your work, your family. She was obsessed with you, Mrs. Mitchell. Even in prison, she spent every day thinking about you and planning some kind of revenge. Sarah's blood ran cold. What kind of revenge? I don't know. But Mrs. Mitchell, there's something else. Alexis didn't just contact my father. She's been corresponding with other people too. People who might want to hurt you. What people? I'm not sure, but she mentioned someone named David, and she talked about a final plan that would be set in motion after she died. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the envelope. Even in death, Alexis was trying to destroy her life. Should I open it? She asked Marcus. Maybe we should call Detective Rodriguez first, he suggested. But Sarah was already tearing open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Alexis's handwriting. Sarah, if you're reading this, then I'm finally free from the prison you put me in. But don't think my death ends this. I've spent 3 years planning the perfect revenge, and it's already in motion. You took everything from me, my freedom, my future, my chance at happiness. Now I'm going to take everything from you. I know you think you're safe in your perfect little house with your perfect little family, but you're not. Danger is closer than you think, and it's coming from someone you trust. David sends his love. By the way, we've been corresponding for months. He's been very helpful in planning what comes next. Watch your back. Sarah. This isn't over. Sarah's hands shook as she finished reading. She's been talking to David. They're planning something together. Marcus immediately called Detective Rodriguez while Sarah tried to process this news. David was still in prison, but apparently that hadn't stopped him from collaborating with Alexis on some kind of final revenge plot. The detective is on her way, Marcus said. Rebecca, I think you should stay until she gets here. Rebecca nodded, looking frightened. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. You're not responsible for your father's actions, Sarah said, though her voice was strained. But do you know anything else about what they were planning? Only that Alexis was very interested in your new assistant. She asked my father to research her background, her financial situation, her personal life. Sarah felt her stomach drop. My assistant, Jennifer. Yes, that's the name. Alexis seemed to think she was important to the plan somehow. Sarah's mind raced. Jennifer had been working for her for 6 months, a bright, ambitious young woman who joined the company straight out of college. She was hardworking, trustworthy, and had quickly become invaluable to Sarah's daily operations. But now, with Alexis's letter in her hands, Sarah began to remember small things. How Jennifer always seemed to know Sarah's schedule. How she'd asked detailed questions about Emma's school and activities. How she'd volunteered to help with personal errands that gave her access to Sarah's home. Oh my God, Sarah whispered. Jennifer. Detective Rodriguez arrived within 20 minutes, her expression grim as she read Alexis's letter. We need to find Jennifer immediately, she said. And we need to put protection on you and Emma. But even as she spoke, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Jennifer's number. Answer it, Detective Rodriguez instructed. But keep her talking. Sarah answered the phone, her heart pounding. Hello. Sarah, it's Jennifer. I'm so sorry to call so late, but there's been an emergency at the office. Someone broke in and destroyed the Morrison files. I think you should come in right away. Sarah met Detective Rodriguez's eyes. Are you sure it can't wait until morning? No. The client is furious. They're threatening to pull the account unless we can show them we have backup copies. I'm at the office now trying to salvage what I can. I'll be right there. After Sarah hung up, Detective Rodriguez shook her head. You're not going anywhere. This is obviously a trap. But what if it's not? What if Jennifer is innocent and there really is an emergency? Then we'll handle it. But Sarah, you're not putting yourself in danger based on the word of someone who might be working with your enemies. Detective Rodriguez called for backup and arranged for officers to go to Sarah's office building. Within an hour, they reported back that the building was dark and empty. There had been no break-in, no emergency, no Jennifer. "She's gone," Detective Rodriguez said. "Her apartment is empty, her car is missing, and her bank accounts were cleaned out yesterday." Sarah felt sick. "How long has she been planning this?" "Probably since the day she started working for you." "Sarah, this woman has had access to your home, your schedule, your family's routines. She knows everything about your life." "Arn, where's Emma?" Sarah asked suddenly, panic rising in her throat. "She's upstairs sleeping," Marcus said. "I'll go check on her." But when Marcus returned, his face was pale. "She's not in her room. Her bed hasn't been slept in." Sarah felt the world tilt around her. "Where is she?" Marcus was already checking the rest of the house, calling Emma's name. But Sarah knew with a cold certainty that Emma wasn't there. Her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed an unknown number. "Hello, Sarah." The voice was Jennifer's, but it sounded different now. Cold, calculating, triumphant. "Where is my daughter?" "She's safe, for now, but that depends on you." "What do you want?" "I want you to come to the place where this all began. The rooftop of the Meridian Hotel. Come alone, and come now. If you hurt her, I won't hurt her if you do exactly what I say. But Sarah, if you bring the police, if you try to be clever, if you do anything other than what I tell you, then Emma will pay the price for your mistakes." The line went dead, and Sarah stared at her phone in horror. "I have to go," she said. "Sarah, no, it's a trap. She has Emma. I don't have a choice." Detective Rodriguez was already coordinating with her team. "We'll surround the building. You'll be protected." "She said no police. She's not going to know we're there." But Sarah remembered the rooftop, remembered how isolated it was, how easy it would be for Jennifer to see anyone approaching. And she remembered what Alexis had been capable of when she was desperate. "I'm going," Sarah said. "But I'm going alone?" "Sarah, that's suicide." "No, it's being a mother. Emma is everything to me. I won't risk her life." An hour later, Sarah stood in the elevator of the Meridian Hotel, riding up to the rooftop where her nightmare had begun 3 years ago. She was unarmed, alone, and terrified. But she was also determined. Emma was all that mattered now. Everything else was secondary. The elevator doors opened, and Sarah stepped out onto the rooftop. The city lights twinkled below, and the wind whipped around her, just as it had that night when Alexis had pushed her over the railing. "Hello, Sarah." Jennifer stepped out of the shadows, and Sarah could see Emma in her arms, the little girl's eyes wide with fear, but unharmed. "Mommy!" Emma cried out, reaching for Sarah. "Let her go," Sarah said. "This is between you and me." "You're right, it is. But first, I want you to understand something. Alexis didn't just plan this revenge. She gave me a choice. I could help her destroy you, or I could watch my own family be destroyed." "What are you talking about?" "My real name is Jennifer Blackwood. Alexis was my sister." Sarah felt her world shift. "Your sister?" "She was the only family I had left, and you destroyed her. You sent her to prison. You drove her to suicide, and you ruined any chance I had of a normal life. Your sister was a criminal. She tried to kill me. My sister was brilliant and ambitious, and she was destroyed by a system that protects women like you. Privileged, suburban, entitled women who think they deserve everything handed to them." Sarah took a step closer. "Jennifer, I understand you're angry, but Emma is an innocent child. She has nothing to do with this. She's your daughter. That makes her everything to do with this. What do you want?" "I want you to feel what Alexis felt. I want you to lose everything you love, everything you've built, everything you think makes you safe." Jennifer moved closer to the railing, Emma still in her arms. "Alexis fell from this roof because of you. It seems fitting that your daughter should follow the same path." "Please," Sarah said. her voice breaking. Please don't hurt her. Take me instead. Oh, I'm going to take you too. But first, I want you to watch your daughter fall. I want you to feel that helplessness, that despair, that complete and total loss of control. Sarah looked at Emma, her beautiful, innocent daughter, and felt a rage unlike anything she'd ever experienced. This woman, this monster, was threatening to kill her child as revenge for crimes she'd never committed. You're not going to hurt her, Sarah said, her voice steady now, filled with a mother's fierce determination. And how are you going to stop me? Like this? Sarah launched herself forward, using every ounce of strength she possessed. She collided with Jennifer, sending them both stumbling backward, but Jennifer's grip on Emma loosened. Run, Emma! Sarah shouted as her daughter scrambled away from the struggle. Sarah and Jennifer fought desperately, each trying to gain the upper hand, but Sarah was fighting for her daughter's life, and that gave her a strength that Jennifer couldn't match. In the end, it was Jennifer who lost her balance, who fell backward toward the railing. But unlike Alexis, Jennifer didn't fall alone. She grabbed Sarah's arm as she went over, trying to pull her down too. For a moment, Sarah teetered on the edge, looking down at the city lights far below. But then she heard Emma's voice calling for her, and she found the strength to pull herself back up. Jennifer wasn't so lucky. She fell silently, her scream lost in the wind. Sarah collapsed on the rooftop, her whole body shaking, and Emma ran into her arms. Mommy, I was so scared. I know, baby, I know. But we're safe now. We're both safe. Detective Rodriguez and her team arrived moments later, having heard the commotion from their positions in the building. They found Sarah and Emma huddled together on the rooftop, both crying, but both alive. It's over, Detective Rodriguez said. This time, it's really over. But as Sarah held Emma close, she realized that it wasn't about the danger being over. It was about the strength she'd found to face it. She'd survived David's betrayal, Alexis's attempts to destroy her, and now Jennifer's quest for revenge. Each time, she'd emerged stronger, more resilient, more determined to protect the people she loved. Are we going home now? Emma asked. Sarah looked out over the city, at the lights that no longer seemed threatening but hopeful. Yes, baby, we're going home. And for the first time in 3 years, Sarah knew that home would truly be safe. The nightmare was finally over. The war was won, and Sarah Mitchell had emerged victorious. Not because she'd destroyed her enemies, but because she'd refused to let them destroy her. She was a survivor. She was a mother. She was free. The end. Epilogue. 5 years later, Sarah sat in her publisher's office, signing copies of her third book, Unbreakable: A Mother's Journey from Victim to Victor. The book had debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and had been optioned for a major motion picture. The response has been incredible, her editor was saying. We've gotten letters from thousands of women who say your story gave them the courage to leave abusive situations. Sarah smiled, thinking about the foundation that now operated in 23 cities, the support groups that met in community centers across the country, the legislation that had been passed to better protect victims of psychological abuse. It's not my story anymore, she said. It's their story too. Outside the publisher's office, Marcus was waiting with Emma, now 10 years old and thriving in 5th grade. She was smart, confident, and showed no signs of the trauma that had surrounded her early years. How did it go? Marcus asked. Good, the book is doing well, and they want to discuss the movie rights. Are you going to do it? Sarah considered this. I think so. If it helps more women, then it's worth it. As they walked through Central Park, Emma running ahead to play on the playground, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The scared, dependent woman who'd been pushed off a rooftop 6 years ago was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more independent, more aware of her own worth. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked. The whole experience. I mean, would you change it if you could? Sarah watched Emma laugh as she went down the slide, her joy infectious and pure. I wouldn't change Emma for anything, she said. and I wouldn't change who I've become. The experience was terrible, but it taught me things I never would have learned otherwise. Like what? Like how strong I really am. Like how important it is to trust my instincts. Like how love isn't about control or possession, but about support and respect. Marcus squeezed her hand. I love who you've become too. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table in their house, the same modest colonial they'd chosen years ago because it felt like home, Sarah looked at her family and felt a deep sense of contentment. Emma was chattering about her day at school. Marcus was sharing a funny story from his practice, and Sarah was simply present, enjoying the ordinary magic of family life. Later, after Emma was in bed and Marcus was reading in the living room, Sarah went to her office and pulled out a letter she'd received that morning. It was from a woman named Maria, who'd read Sarah's book and found the courage to leave her abusive husband. Dear Sarah, the letter began, I want to thank you for showing me that it's possible to survive, to fight back, and to build a better life. Your story gave me hope when I had none, and strength when I felt weak. Because of you, my daughter and I are safe now. We're free. Sarah wiped away a tear and filed the letter with the hundreds of others she'd received over the years. Each one was a reminder that her pain had not been in vain, that her story had helped others find their own strength. She turned off the lights and went to join Marcus in the living room. Emma was safely asleep upstairs. The house was secure, and tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. Sarah Mitchell had survived the worst that life could throw at her. She'd been betrayed, manipulated, and nearly destroyed. But she'd fought back, she'd won, and she'd built something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. The CEO's mistress had pushed her off a roof, but Sarah's survival had stunned everyone, including herself. She discovered a strength she never knew she possessed, a determination that couldn't be broken, and a love that was fierce enough to overcome any obstacle. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, a warrior, a mother, and a woman who had learned that the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's refusing to let them defeat you. The story was over. The new life had begun, and Sarah Mitchell was finally, truly free.